If we are past the hour, if I could get the committee members to please come and have a seat, we can start the meeting. In the meantime, well, there's not a whole lot I can do. Councillor Ferguson, please. Thank you, Councillor Vanderbeek. Good morning. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, we have a last-minute change to the agenda, which is a presentation accompanying item 7.1, responding to increased demand and growth in film sector to increase economic impacts and implement continuous improvements, which is also known as case study number 27.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. Oh, we have to electronic vote, Madam Clerk. Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And does anyone have any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none, Councillor Partridge? No, you're okay? Good. Thank you. And may I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held June 10th, 2019? Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Danko. All in favor? No, we have to approve the minutes as a recorded vote. Thank you. So I'm going to go right into, they're not consent items as listed in our agenda, but they are staff presentations. So item 7.1 is responding to the increased demand and growth in film sector to increase economic impacts and implement continuous improvements, case number 27. We have this morning Kim Adravez and Debbie Spence are going to come down and give us a bit of an overview. Thank you. And you have it before you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Spence, and this is my colleague Kim. We're going to kind of go back and forth for this presentation. So I'm going to pass the first couple slides to Kim.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning. We're here to talk to you about responding to increased demand and growth in the film sector and increasing economic impacts and implementing continuous improvement. So first of all, we just wanted to talk to you about the value of the business in Ontario. Ontario's GDP for creative media industries, which includes film, was $7 billion in 2017. Filming in Ontario increased by 23% from 2014 to 2017 and resulted in $1.6 billion in direct spend. It's an industry that continues to grow and is expected to grow by 5.3% annually and to $2.1 billion in direct spend by 2022. So just some stats specific to Hamilton. In Hamilton, we did see a 50% increase in the number of permits we issue between 2017 and 2018. And we continue to see an increase and have seen a 10% increase so far in 2019 versus 2018. We are the second busiest city in Ontario for permits after Toronto, which also makes us one of the busiest jurisdictions in Canada. Approximately 70% of productions that film in Hamilton are Canadian-based, which is a positive sign because it means we're less susceptible to fluctuations in the American dollar interrupting our business. About 45% of the productions that film here are TV series, but we also see feature films, commercials, documentaries, just about any genre you can think of. And that resulted in 2018 in a $60 million direct spend in Hamilton. So, did you want to do these stats?
Sure. So I'm going to pop in here. So some of you have seen this slide or similar slide before. This comes from the creative industry sector profile. We talk about an over 9,000 person workforce. So those are people that are living in Hamilton. They might have to work in Toronto, but they're living here. 901 businesses are related to film. We're home to the third largest cluster of film businesses in Canada, third largest employment growth. So we're really seeing that trajectory there as well. And it's the top area of growth within creative industries for Hamilton itself.
And this is just coming back to illustrate the growth in the locations filming in Hamilton, which we measure in terms of the number of permits we issue. So as you can see, it's been fairly steady between 2014 and 2017, with about between 500 and 550 permits per year. And then we saw quite a bit of growth in 2018, 50% increase, and we issued 811 permits. So when we're trying to respond to that and accommodate that growth and keep Hamilton as a prime jurisdiction for filming, we have to think about what the key concerns are for the industry. And so with this industry, it's a very fast pace due to production schedule, particularly since we're seeing such an increase in online and streaming content. And the way that content is produced is different from traditional, for example, feature films, where there's quite a bit of lead time to source locations and get all the logistics in place. What we're seeing now in terms of demand for the industry is an expectation of very, very fast turnaround times to secure all the logistical details for filming. We're looking at a highly creative, flexible, and constantly changing environment, which I'm sure many of you who we work with see on the day-to-day. Our main competitor is Toronto, and they process permit requests much faster than Hamilton in an average of 1 to 2 business days. Scouting inquiries and expectations for on-site visits and walkthroughs are another sort of pressure to staff that we're responding to. Why we want to accommodate this, obviously, are the benefits that it brings to the city, and it brings a huge economic benefit. In 2018, there was $60 million in direct spend reported by the industry, which is money that's actually spent in Hamilton with no multiplier attached to it. As of September 2019, we had $56 million reported so far. Film revenues bring in revenues directly to the corporation as well as to the private sector. So ways that we see revenue coming into the city includes permit fees, rentals of parks and city-owned assets, road closure fees, parking lots, parking meters, and paid duty officers. The money that comes to the private sector is mostly in the form of property rentals and longer-term leases, prop and equipment rentals, hotel stays and hospitality, restaurant and retail spending, donations to BIAs, etc.
So my role is the business development consultant for creative industries, and so I work with businesses that want to open bricks and mortar businesses here. And there is a direct correlation between locations filming and when we bring that business in, they're like a visitor, and then a lot of them turn into the bricks and mortar that want to open here. So you'll see the second bullet point talks about 85% of the inquiries from businesses that I receive that want to open a business here have filmed here. So have either filmed here as a business, or they're a scout, or they're working on the crew. And again, as I mentioned, film productions are similar to visitors in that they have overnight stays. So they get a better sense of the city and a better understanding of, I want to live here. There's a Pure Michigan research study that talks about that correlation. There is a direct correlation between visitors that stay here having a much higher chance of wanting to live in a city they visited, wanting to go to school here, wanting to open a business, and so on. And then in 2019, staff have been directly involved in 2 business expansions, so of existing businesses for film, and 3 new businesses wanting to or have opened in Hamilton in 2019. So I think one of the big reasons we're here is talking about continuous improvement. And again, the work that we do throughout the film office and in my role as well is seen with an open for business lens. So what drives staff in terms of trying to respond and get those permits out is the fact that we want to be open for business. We want to drive more direct spend for the city in terms of the corporation, but also for the private sector as well. And so we've done a lot of really hard work when it comes to, I guess, true continuous improvement or Lean Six Sigma. And this work has helped us demonstrate that there is a need for additional staff. And so we've realigned existing staff resources to respond to that increased demand and volume via this business case. We've also worked really hard in terms of generating additional revenue that we didn't have. And so Kim and I worked on a project together, and we looked at what are the opportunities in terms of city assets. So there was city land that's owned by us, and we worked with our partners in facilities and in real estate to say there's an opportunity. We know that one of the biggest challenges is finding parking and short-term parking. So I think we implemented this in June or May, and we've already brought in for the city $100K in new revenues via short-term parking with unused, again, city land. So we're, again, that open for business. We don't want to leave money on the table from that perspective. And then some kind of general things we've done is we've improved and enhanced the film content, both for the businesses, how do you get a permit, how can you meet the timelines and our requirements, and then also for the residents as well. And then in terms of, we're working towards, fingers crossed, in terms of technology to get online forms and payment options, because that's really important to staff and really important to our clients as well. And then we've also worked drafting a film sector development plan to establish very clear goals and KPIs to help move us forward.
Thank you, excellent. And I have a huge speakers list. First, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and welcome. So, Debbie, you say you employ 9,140 people in Hamilton in the film industry. How many of those are full-time jobs?
So this is reported through Stats Canada. So this is people that are saying, this is my job. This is what I work as. In the film industry, it's kind of like construction. I think you're familiar with that industry. And so there's an ebb and flow. So there will be, I know we find probably it ramps up in April and then runs all the way to November. So they're working like long hours. And so that will kind of help them in the kind of times where they're not
So it
as
sounds
busy.
like most of them are seasonal workers or part-time workers, so they get hired for a film, then laid off at the end, and get hired with another film crew. And
Sure, yeah, so it's that's how crews will work, but then there's also pre and post-production, so script writers, people that are doing the CGI, people that are doing the like the effects kind of work, and actors and so on, they'll kind of have a continuous flow, but certainly, and it's union and non-union, so there will be people that are kind of cycling through. Kim, were you?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so typically this would be the only job they have. It wouldn't be a part-time job or supplemented by any other employment. It's very well paid, and so they're able to work very long hours at a good rate during the season, and that they earn enough income that when it's a little bit quieter, they're working perhaps a bit more sporadically, but they don't seek other employment.
okay, and so I guess from your answer, there is no way to measure how many are full-time, how many are salaried employees.
Well, they're basically all full, like the nature of the industry is that it's seasonal employment, but it's their full-time occupation. They don't have other occupation. So they would perhaps work an 80-hour week during the high season and a 30-hour week during the low season, but it evens out to full-time employment that they wouldn't supplement with other sources.
Okay, so I assume a lot of them would go on unemployment insurance while they're laid off, though, wouldn't they?
The way the industry works is that each production is actually set up as a brand new corporation for accounting purposes. So they wouldn't be full-time with an employer for multiple years in the way that we would, working for this corporation. They would get hired by a production, and then hired by another production, and then hired by another production. It's just the way the industry works.
Okay. $59.8 million is spent from filming in Hamilton. How do you measure that?
It's reported directly by the industry.
By what?
It's reported directly by the industry according to best practices that are used throughout North America. And the way that we sort of verify it is to look at overall budgets and check the reasonableness of what they've reported to us. If it seems overly high or overly low, then we follow up and verify. I would say I feel quite comfortable with this number because we have not yet followed up with about 20% of our productions that have reported no direct spend that we know have actually spent quite a bit of money.
Okay, my last question, I'd like to know, I've thought that'd be in your presentation. How many, you issued in 2018, 811 permits. How much revenue does that generate? How much per permit? How much does it generate in the rental of space, like parking lots? And
So that We have it on here, but that slide that talks about how it breaks out, we have revenues direct to, so how we get to that 60 million is revenues direct to the city. So it's 60, right now it's about $60 per permit. So 60 times 800, or 811. And then also parking fees, and property rentals, road closures, parking lots, all that kind of stuff, street meters, and then plus the spend. So hotel stays. We've had some productions stay for 5 nights at 100 hotels, 100 rooms over the course of time.
I'm looking at direct revenue to the city, so it's 800 permits times $6 is $48,000.
Correct, but that's just that's a tiny slice. That doesn't include park rentals,
That's
city-owned properties.
$100,000 for that, isn't it? I saw that in the slide, so it's
That's just
That
one.
$100,000 was actually just one type of rental. So one thing that we did new this year was
okay,
to,
in the future, it'd be very helpful to know what's our total revenue and what's our total cost? Because the film industry is great, but it does cause inconvenience. I get complaints where they're set up in streets and closing streets. And I want to be able to say to them, this reduces your taxes because we're able to generate revenue. I didn't see in the presentation today how much. You know, I'm not terribly interested in what they spend on hotel rooms because the city doesn't see that, or what they spend in restaurants. I'm more interested in what do they spend in permits. I mean, road closure fees, there is cost associated with that too.
there are.
And rentals. And so like $48,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money for the permit.
No, right, and I would say that's sort of a drop in the bucket. That's the sort of very small administrative fee for the permit. But yes, absolutely, it is something that we've scoped in when we're looking at
I'd like to
our
see
improvements
what's the net revenue to
to the city, for sure.
based on this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek?
Thank you. Madam Chair, through you. I too have questions about, and I'm going to skip them because Councillor Ferguson already asked them, but I would like to know what it is that the municipality gleans from our film industry. It's a great number, 59.8 million estimated across the city, and that's an important number. But I would like I'd like to know what our film industry is providing to and costing us as a municipality, because we do ask for that information from other departments, and I think that that really should be, I mean, it's great that it says, you know, it breaks down where they come from, but I'd like to know what they are. And I think it would be helpful when we justify things to our constituents, who, particularly in areas where the film industry is using the same street over and over. It might be over and over in a year, it might be over and over every year. And I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, I think that people get tired sometimes of the inconveniences, you know, the trucks arriving late, not knowing in advance what's happening. And so that leads me to my next question. What is our turnaround time?
It varies. Our commitment is 3 to 5 business days, but it varies, and we always try to accommodate the nature of the industry and turn over as quickly as we can.
Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, I have concerns about receiving film permits the day before the film's starting, or sometimes the afternoon before it starts at 7 a.m. in the morning. So I want to know whether in 3 to 5 days the residents are being circulated, and how you are or are not able to assimilate all of the information about what goes on in a ward, in a community. If councillors are not being circulated to be, at least I'm not being circulated, to be able to say, you know, listen, this weekend is Scarecrow Saturday, I don't know, whatever it is. And I realize that in Dundas, because I can only speak to Dundas and Flamborough, the BIA is circulated, often close to the last minute, but they are being circulated. I thank you for that. But we have municipal buildings in town, and I'm wondering how that information, if you're going to be trying to achieve a 1 to 2 day turnaround like Toronto, how is that information all being connected to your office so that you can make that decision quickly. So when things go on, and I'm going to use Town Hall because this is a situation that arose this past week, where things are happening at Town Hall, rooms are rented out, there's only 24 or 27 parking spaces. There isn't a lot of on-street parking. Trucks come in, they say they won't get there till a certain time, but they always come early. I have residents on that street, a new business on that street. The street, I'm not complaining about it being closed off. It's just at the last minute, when there's a meeting upstairs that's going to have, 50 or 100 people, and a meeting downstairs that's going to have 40 to 50, then I worry about that information not being imparted. These guys bring trucks in, and people have nowhere to go because there's a lot of no parking in the area of the Dundas Municipal Service Center. So I'm only using it as an example. I'm not objecting. If you can give people who have rooms booked on an ongoing basis enough time, they can change their meeting time. But when you don't provide a film permit information to me or to staff, and they don't have time, and I can see that it wasn't canceled, they don't have time to follow through on the logistics to make that happen, and all of a sudden we have a huge turmoil.
So if I could speak to that example in particular, in that case, our process was actually followed. So what happened was when the production was thinking of coming to the street, as we requested, they contacted the BIA 5 days in advance. I understand the BIA forwarded you their draft notification letter, which included mention of putting a sign on Town Hall. The production then followed up with our office to say, we would like to put a sign on Dundas Town Hall. Is that feasible? There's not actually any parking on the street. There's not actually any entrance into Town Hall, and there's not actually any disruption beyond what they had discussed with the BIA. But in the case that there were, then we would have immediately worked with facilities to see if there were any room bookings. We would have worked with your office to notify you, just as at City Hall we would work with Pat DiLeonardo to circulate notification to all the affected people here. So there is a process, and there's not an expectation that councillors need to flag issues because that's being handled with staff. The bylaw actually delegates the authority to staff for permitting, and so all of those steps are taken at our end. Absolutely understand your concern, and with short notice, how do you give enough notice? And that's something that we're always trying to balance and mitigate. And so as soon as we hear of those requests, those are the types of questions we ask. Going back to that specific example, okay, we're only 5 days out, so what are you trying to do? It's not going to be feasible to get into the building because there are meetings. It's not going to be feasible to close down the street. There's a new business. There's not parking available at the Town Hall. And when we unpack it and see, actually, we've rented a private driveway, so it's money going to the community, to that new business, and we don't need to get into Town Hall, then we consider whether or not it's possible and provide notification. I think the other piece of that is just around the permits that get circulated versus notification. So we do require notification to go out in advance in the form of a notification letter that's written in a way that's very easy to understand to all those who are affected. The permit is a little bit harder to unpack, and we do circulate those as a courtesy, but with the expectation that notice has already been provided to all affected stakeholders well in advance per our process. And I think you and I have a meeting offline, we can talk about whether that's something that needs to be addressed in terms of that process, and we can certainly do that as well.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I would like to talk about it offline, and I know you offered, and I have not had time to get back to you, given a few emergencies I've had in my ward in the last 4 or 5 days. But this has been a common thread that permits come sort of bang, and the next day they're putting something forward. I think what I'm asking is to have circulation to. There may be councillors who don't want that, but when it comes to demolition permits, it comes to committee of adjustment requests, it comes to sort of all kinds of things. We are circulated just simply to let us know so that we can comment, because we do know the hot spots in our wards. We know where things are happening. You could not know. And so just the opportunity to, even if it's this permit has come in, if we don't see it and respond, that's on us. But at least circulating to the ward councillor gives the ward councillor an opportunity to get back to you and say, here's what I know about this community at this time. But when you send a film permit the evening before the filming starts, then that's not good for the film industry, and it's not good for the community. And it doesn't do well when a councillor then lets you know that something's going on that you could not know about, because all of that information is not available in the database of this corporation.
Absolutely, and we will continue to circulate permits to councillors and loop councillors in when there's an impactful event in their ward. And as I said, I'm looking forward to meeting with you offline. We can look at that process. A lot of it is the nature of the industry, whereas a construction event would be planned for several months in advance, that we're trying to respond on quite tight turnaround times, and we're trying to balance being open for business and being prepared to service that industry and meet them where they are with the need for notification and mitigating impacts. So it's certainly something that, exactly what we're talking about, continuous improvement and trying to find the right balance. And we can definitely meet offline and get into it a little bit further, how it could work a bit better.
So I think that through you, Madam Chair, and I won't belabor this, I'm going to stop after this comment, but we did have it down at one point. And staff worked really hard to do that. And now it seems to have backed up a step, and I am assuming that that's because we're trying to be quicker about turning the permits around. So in being quicker about turning the permits around, I just don't want that to get lost, because I see that, I see it because it doesn't come across my desk anymore. So I guess I just want to emphasize that being open for business is also about making sure that things are covered so that that production company can come in and do their job and get out and not have a huge hassle or a permit that has to be changed 5 hours before their trucks arrive. And so I want to make sure that the being open for business here is a two-way street. So thank you. I'm not cutting you off. If you have something you want to say, go ahead. But
no, thank you. We appreciate, and we will. We'll continue to maintain that balance. It has, as you commented, been a busy year. 50% increase in volume in 2018. So that has, I'm sure, led to quite a few more requests, and perhaps might feel like shorter turnaround time. But we will certainly continue to work on that with you.
thank you.
Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Kim, Debbie, good presentation. Thank you. And I do agree with somewhat of what has been said by the two previous speakers. So I won't go down that road. One of my questions was answered, but I just want to clarify that I heard the answer properly. My question was going to be on the turnaround time for permits. I didn't see that explicitly in the report or in here, but what I thought I heard was 3 to 5 days. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, thank you. So on this slide that's up at the very bottom, the spend to the private sector, it talks about donations. And I just need you to unpack that a little bit. Like how are we made aware of donations being made? Is it circulated to councillors? Do they know about it if it's in their particular ward? Because I just have some concerns around that. So can you speak to that for me?
Yes, certainly. So I would say that it's something that we're made aware of, that we seek from the productions, but it's somewhat ad hoc. So it's one thing that we've been working towards collecting in a more formal way so we can present that back to you. With donations to BIAs, we're aware of it because we facilitate the introduction. So as soon as we know that there's a production that's going to be filming in a BIA, we get confirmation or we send an email introducing them to the BIA chair so that they can talk about their plans. And then the expectation of the industry is that they'll then make a donation back to the BIA to assist with beautification or different problems as a thank you for having been in the way during filming. But in addition to that, the things that we know about are oftentimes the industry working with us to try to find a solution that works for everyone. So an example that comes to mind in your ward, I believe, is there's a park off Carlisle Road that the production wanted to use for some parking during the winter when there wasn't as much use of the park. And the issue was that, or sorry, I should say during the early spring. So having just thawed, there's large kind of rivets in the parking lot. And what this production did in that case then, which is sort of common kind of example of how they problem solve with us, is that they paid to have the parking lot regraded and have all the holes filled in, and then contacted the park association to let them know that had been done. The park association was really thrilled. It's a service that the city then doesn't have to pay for. We're able to accommodate the parking and have the money coming in for the rentals of the farms that they were using in the area. And so it's just that win-win that we're trying to find over and over.
And I appreciate that, Madam Chair. You know, it is good to know, but it would be really helpful if you would let the ward councillor know. In this case, you know, I have lots of big parks in my ward, and they are well used for filming and for parking, and I have no issue with that whatsoever. But in some cases, the community group of these parks is down to like one person, and so and they look after the stewardship of the park in some cases, but they never put any money into the park. And so that is a good news story that I think would be helpful if it came to the councillor. So my request, Madam Chair, is that anything that happens in my ward, I want to know about it, and I want to get, I don't even need a heads up about it happening ahead of time, it's just that it does happen. You know, I just think it's a good thing, okay? And we also have food banks. I think everybody around this table, most of us have food banks, and so, you know, an Interval House Women's Center is what we have with a rural outreach program. So there's other areas, too, that it would make sense for some donations to come in. But I'm glad to hear that you're working on it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Rachel?
Thank you. I guess I don't need to press anything. Sorry, first time. I'm a novice. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. As Barton Street BIA, I see firsthand the impact that filming has on our community, and it's quite huge. We have had a huge vacant building just being filled through a film company. That's very exciting for us. It's been empty for a long time. We've got filming there today. We've had, talking about donations, we've had a button jar at 541. They do a button jar, if anybody's aware of that. This film company completely filled their button jar for them. So amazing things like that we're just seeing very positive impacts in our community, and we welcome filming. I'm very appreciative of the creative parking solutions that you're coming up with, because that's definitely a comment that we get a lot of times with regards to parking. And I do appreciate the relationship that you're building with BIAs and communities so that we're informed whenever filming does happen. I did just want to ask a few questions about, I noticed you said there's a huge jump in 2018, so 50% jump, that's great. Was that the same province-wide, or was that just Hamilton?
It was province-wide, so we work closely with Ontario Creates, which is the arm's-length agency to the Ministry of Tourism, Sport and Culture that manages Ontario's Film Commission, and they reported similar growth.
Nice. And based on that, have other municipalities been increasing staffing for the filming department to accommodate those increases? Is that increase estimated to continue, or is it kind of like, okay, we're going to stay in the 800 level?
So through what Kim knows a little bit more, but we did a better practice research kind of way back when to GIC, I think a couple of years ago, and we looked at the ratio of staff versus the permit levels. And Toronto obviously is much larger, and they have they actually have a lower ratio to staff to permits than we do. We have a higher ratio of permits to staff. And other jurisdictions are not, they're seeing small increases, but not like Hamilton. We get a lot of inquiries from cities like London, Brantford, but they have processing of maybe, like I've heard, like 5 permits for the year versus 800. So they're not quite there yet, but Kim can probably talk to it a bit too.
I mean, just echoing Debbie in terms of the number of staff and the number of permits that we're processing, we do have one of the smaller staff complements province-wide, but again, there's a lot of variation. A huge part of what we're trying to do is maintain competitive standing against similar communities like Mississauga or Cambridge that are also seeing that increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mateo?
Thanks very much. I don't need to, you can hear me, I don't need to push the button. I've got Madam Chair, I've got a 2.5-part question, just picking up on some of the things Councillor Ferguson and Vanderbeek had said. I have a little bit of, just as a little bit of background, a bit of knowledge about the industry. My brother works actually as a production assistant, first, second, assistant director, things like that. So when it comes to employment and the speed that the industry moves in, over the years I've picked up a lot on it, also recognizing the councillors are struggling with the need to take care of their constituents' needs, and as a constituent myself of a city ward, I've been occasionally inconvenienced as well by shoots that, happening on my street and so on. And so just on that one, a little bit of maybe a seedling of an idea that might be helpful. I agree with Councillor Ferguson. I think it'd be great to see the books of the department, understanding what your business case is and where the resources are coming and going from, because I understand part of the challenge is, as we're trying as a city to be more competitive, to attract more of this, that lead time, 3 to 5 business days, we want to try to cut down. Of course, it makes it difficult to, as Councillor Vanderbeek brought up, address the residents and so on. So how do you make the taxpayer feel that they're being looked after? Well, maybe if, my street is at my house it's street parking only, or it's, it's an older neighborhood and that becomes a big inconvenience, well, then maybe there's enough, profit in there to do, like, I don't know, we're blocking your street for 3 days, here's $10 a day to the taxpayer, if that's something. But just as a seedling of an idea. So I would agree with the councillors that it'd be interesting to look more into the books behind that. From the business side and attracting, I know you've addressed this already in bits, but so what's really holding you guys up? Is it staff resources to be more competitive towards Toronto and so on?
So I guess I'll start with it in terms of, as Kim was mentioning, so we're, one kind of maybe misnomer is that the film office kind of perhaps arbitrarily says, yes, we want you to come in and we approve your permit. We're at the end stage, we're at the beginning, and then we're at the end. So we work with, and we have to work really well with our partners in parking, because they will review it in roads and so on. And the administrative services to do that. So one piece is the corporation kind of in or out in terms of filming. So are we all wanting to increase filming, to maintain it, and so on? And then there are challenges around if we, you could say, okay, we can't get to your permit. We know they will film anyway, and then we get the complaints, or it's generally parking. We did a continuous improvement around complaints, and we found parking, as you mentioned, was kind of the highest concern and thread. But yeah, looking into what we can do, and I believe that report from GAC, we had broken down in terms of what the revenues were to the city, so we can look to doing that again in terms of the money that just goes direct to the corporation out of that $60 million as well. So
Yeah, no, I mean that's fine. I'm here to try to advise council and generate ideas. So.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, good morning.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I'm really keen on the economic development opportunities that come out of the film office. So this has been in development for many years, and the work that you're doing, I think, is very positive. Unlike one of my councillors, I'm very interested in the direct spend in the community. That's really what it's all about. That's what you do, and that's what your mandate is. There's no business case. So I am a little fascinated by that notion, but I do believe that you're on cost recovery, right? So the permitting and the staffing cost is covered by the fees that you charge, or is it,
It's,
ahead.
yes and no. So we would say,
Give me the yes first.
yeah. I mean, what I would say to that is that just thinking back to the last time we reported to GIC on revenues to the city, which was 2017, so before the increase, would have been using half of the year of 2017. We were at about $400,000 in revenue to the city. That's for half a year. So if we figure that we probably landed on the safe side, let's say $750,000 to the corporation in terms of fees directly to the corporation, before we were 50% busier, we've got 2.5 staff. So I'd love to say that I make $300,000 a year, but it's not the case. So certainly the money coming in and the money going out, there's more coming in than going out.
Right. So which makes my point that you're not only at cost recovery, you're actually generating revenue for the municipality in terms of tax offsets.
Well, and that's where I would say it's yes and no, because there is, as Debbie pointed out, more staff beyond just ourselves that are touching it, and included in that number is the hiring of paid duty officers. So certainly we'll have to look at it a bit more closely and break it out. But yes, I would say overall we're spending very little, 2.5 staff, to generate quite a bit of revenue to both the corporation and obviously the community at large. And then the other sort of layer that's not quite factored into that is the non-residential tax, right? That's generated when we see these film businesses coming.
Right. And I mean, the spillover is into not just direct employment in terms of the film production, but the supplies that they require, the food that they commission throughout the community, the other supplies in terms of props or artifacts that they have, set designers, set builders. I mean, it's an industry that is employing, not only 9,140 directly, but there are potentially indirect employment opportunities that come out of that as well, correct?
Absolutely, and there's indirect economic impact, and all we've talked about is direct, so
Right.
absolutely.
So, and I understand that from time to time there are conflicts in the community in terms of the impacts, and I think that happens. But I think your processing process is set up to try and help mitigate that, right?
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. So just to perhaps clarify for everyone, when a request initially comes in for a permit, it's very rare that we approve it as is, and we work with the production company to reduce the scope and reduce the impacts on each and every permit.
So I think this is a ballooning industry, and I think we need to be part of it. The good news, and that goes beyond this, is the work that's happening in the film studio space, which is happening in several locations, and I think the aspirational part of that is huge for the industry as well as for the community. In fact, might actually divert some of the on-street filming to actually set locations that would be more studio-oriented rather than out on the street or at City Hall. And there's a fair bit of filming going on at City Hall on a pretty regular basis. I'm actually personally delighted to see it. I think it's a great employment opportunity, great opportunity to actually spread economic development throughout the city, and that number is really quite impressive. And if you were to add a multiplier, what kind of multiplier would one normally add to that kind of economic development initiative?
I'm looking over at Julia. I believe the province was in the range of about 2.5 times.
So that's always somewhat. So let's make it 1.5 times. That puts it into the $100 million range, which is really quite significant in our community as an industry and as part of our economic development thrust. So I appreciate everything you're doing. I think, notwithstanding some of the concerns around processing and permitting and notification, this is really important work, and I think you're doing a terrific job.
And then also to kind of respond to that is, if you'll recall, in the Economic Development Action Plan, the stretch goal was to bring in a major film studio. And driving that is location. So the industry sees locations as part of the film infrastructure for a city. And so other cities that are struggling with getting their council to say, hey, we want to have filming, the industry businesses there, it's a little difficult when it's build it and they will come. the industry is here already. And so that's the business case for the production studio to come here, is because the industry is here already.
Yes, but we also shouldn't forget that it was a 30% out of Toronto tax credit that's available to people to do productions here?
Correct. So that, again, that's additionally driving them here. That's an additional business case to kind of sweeten the deal.
Which we need to kind of continue to take advantage of. I think that's a
Yes.
great opportunity. So, good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fothergill, go ahead. Good morning. Hello? Just turn it on. Nope,
You got to turn it on.
I did, sorry.
There you go.
All right, sorry. You may have just actually answered the question in your last comment. I was following up with the mayor's comments. We've done a great job so far. The question always is, what can we do to get to the next level? If we have 800 permits now, can we get to 1,500? Is there a target you're looking at? Is there a way to at least increase it? And does that relate back to staff? You said you had about 2.5 staff. If you had a staff of 10, could you do that much more? Just where are we going in the future on this?
It's certainly increasing. Our own projections by Ontario Creates are that it will continue to increase. Certainly, I mean, in any department, more resources enables you to do a bit better job. But what we're really trying to do with what we've got is look at continuous improvement and look at ways that we can maximize resources like technology. Our Amanda program, we're working with our IT people to have applications put online to reduce some of the manual processing that our staff does. We're looking at ways to ensure that the process runs very, very smoothly across the corporation so that there's very quick responses from one department to the other to help facilitate that. And it's really a matter of the better you do, the better you do. So the more we can accommodate the industry, the more they come back, the more permits. It kind of keeps the momentum rolling and then rolls right into Debbie's area where we see film businesses springing up, expanding, a studio coming, et cetera.
And I'll kind of add to that. So it really for the corporation to understand if we're looking at a strategic growth or we're just looking at saying, okay, can we just handle what we have? And then also, we don't do much in terms of to promote more productions coming in a big way. They just come in. So we're just kind of processing what we, if we were to be strategic and say we want to kind of grow it. So that's why when we mentioned one of the elements of the continuous improvement is that staff have looked at, if we're looking at it strategically, what are those different elements? Toronto has a film strategy, and their council has endorsed that. They do a bunch of different things. Again, they're much farther ahead than we are. So it really depends on if the corporation wants to look at it from a more strategic standpoint and where we want to land, because that's really what we, I think, personally struggle with. Are we just trying to, kind of approve what we have, and then, or do we want to kind of shrink the box? And if we do, we have to change our process in which to do that.
You shut yourself, sorry. Go ahead. Don't touch it. I put you, no, hang on, push it again now. Sorry, Ed. Push it again. Thank you. When the red light's on, you're on.
So just following up on that, so we don't have necessarily a film strategy at the city, is that correct?
Correct. So we apply strategic thinking, but there's no, we have a music strategy, for example, there's no film strategy.
Is that something we should be doing?
That's what right now, that's what we are looking at and building upon. Again, that's why we have created objectives and KPIs to say, are these the right objectives? And again, corporately, because we can't just within film office and just within tourism and culture make arbitrary decisions to say, we want to turn around permits now in 2 days because we rely on our colleagues in order to do that. So the corporation has to kind of decide, and we have to agree that that's going to work in that way.
So when does that strategy come forward to the city?
That kind of depends on the gentleman that I look up over there in terms of what we're looking at doing. So we take that to our director, Carrie Brooks Joyner, and then, to kind of thoughtfully. I think everyone is strategic in their thought, and then it will probably be a discussion around, is that the, do we, and sometimes strategies, we don't want a strategy to sit on a filing cabinet. We want to actually be able to implement it and to have that wholesome conversation, that it's operationalized, but it's also strategic.
And I think Mr. Thorne wants to jump in as well.
Yeah, so through the chair, just to elaborate, so we are looking, we're developing our 2020 work plans right now, so that is something we're considering, especially given the significant growth we've seen in this area. As was stated earlier, what we've been able to do to accommodate the growth in permits in the short term has been to reallocate some resources within that division to boost it up to the 2.5 staff that was mentioned earlier. We've done that not through the creation of positions, but through the reallocation of resources. But we've been looking at including something around the film strategy in 2020, especially given the timing of the ECDEV action plan update, which we'll also be looking at in 2020, and just in recognition of the fact that film is becoming an increasingly significant part of our economic development portfolio, giving it some focused attention as part of that update to the overall ECDEV action plan.
Okay, all right with that. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, second time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just would like to get the hard numbers just so we know what we're looking at. Because maybe, you were saying we made $700,000. I didn't see that today. And so as I'm listening to the debate, I see where we know that development pays for development. We know that building pays for building. We know that parking pays for parking. And this would probably fall in that same category as a revenue generator, but don't know, it may. So I'd just like to move that staff be directed to report back at a future open for business meeting the gross and net benefit to the city of Hamilton in any for our film office. And I think Councillor Partridge will second that. And so I'm not looking for the economic benefit. That's a number that a third party puts together. It doesn't necessarily benefit the city. It might go to restaurant operators. It might go to, which is all good, restaurant operators and hotels and other people, but I'd like to know what the net economic benefits of the city. We get that for development. We get that for building, and we get it for the parking on an annual basis. Since this is a booming industry, I'd like to know where we set for the city's benefit, gross and net numbers, and how you get to those numbers. Because if I look at $48,000 for permits, $100,000 for rentals, but you're saying we're get a total revenue of $700,000. I don't know how you get there when you're only getting $148,000. You don't need to answer that now. Bring it back in the report because it'd be nice to have it in front of us. I mean, 3 staff are going to cost us $300,000. Time you get salaries and payroll burdens like UIC, CPP, WSIB, and all that, and our benefit program, and they have to have offices, telephones, and computers. So I'm using the average staff cost as $100,000 per person. So just show that all to us, just so we can make sure when we get the phone call from our constituency, yeah, we're doing okay in this film industry, and be able to answer it with a hard number in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thorne has a comment that he wants to put forward on that.
Yes, through the chair, just to say that I think it's a well-timed motion. The last time we did that was 2017. I believe it actually was Councillor Ferguson's motion from early in 2017 where we produced that report, and that's where the $750,000 is coming from. But I think doing something once we have the closeout of the 2019 year, which we expect will be another very high permit year, will be a good time to do the same thing. So I certainly understand the spirit of the motion. What we'd look at reporting back is similar to we did in 2017, which is just direct city revenues. I think just to speak to the point of cost recovery, why it was sort of a yes/no answer is that the permit fees, which are the only revenues that actually come into this division, aren't full cost recovery. It's when you look at the global revenues coming into all of the city divisions, not all of which comes into tourism and culture. So we can include that in the report back as to what comes into the city overall, what comes in just to tourism and culture from just the film permit fees, and break it down that way. I would just add to the discussion as well that as you know, this is one of the few economic sectors that even has any sort of revenue recovery. So we do have within economic development, we have staff focused on advanced manufacturing. We have staff focused on agribusiness. who do similar kinds of work in outreach to a sector and development of a sector, and there's no fee recovery to that. The film's a little bit unusual in that case, but film's also a little bit unusual in that we don't issue permits for those other economic sectors. So we can elaborate that in the report back that the councilor's requesting. Like I said, I think it's well timed because the last time we did that similar analysis was 2017 when we were at as much fewer annual permits.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Fred?
I was going to make most of those points, but so do we not report that out through our budgeting process, actually? Jason?
So through the chair, we only report, in terms of a distinct line item in the budget, we would only report on film permit revenues. We don't break out, for example, how much of the parking revenues is parking revenues due to film activity. Same with our recreation facilities, some of our heritage facilities. We just report those as general revenues in the budget process. We don't indicate whether the user was someone from the film sector or not. So we can differentiate that in the report back to what council.
You haven't aggregated them into this kind of sector. Okay, fair enough. I'll support the motion, but certainly, also don't want to go down this rabbit hole of, economic development is now going to be a profit center. I mean, I think that would be great, but the reality is that it's about generating that direct spend and beyond. I think that's very important. And so, we don't really make that equation in other sectors. But if we get permitting processes, and we always go for cost recovery, and most of our permitting processes are application forms or application fees, that's critically important. If we can add some dollars to the tax base on top of that, all the better. But that's the important number in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And no, I'm very pleased to second this. And I do want to add in, though, that I think this should be an annual report that comes to Open for Business or whatever appropriate committee it would fall within. Councillor Ferguson has agreed that it would be a friendly amendment to this particular motion. So, Madam Clerk, if you can find the right place to kind of add that in, that it become an annual report, and what would be the appropriate committee. But I am happy to second this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and it's been moved and seconded duly. That's the motion on the floor. Before we do move on, I am totally supportive. I agree. I think it's wonderful that we have this opportunity in Hamilton. I'll tell you, there's a lot more things than just what has been said that the industry involves as purchases and rentals, et cetera, in the city of Hamilton when they're putting these films on. And there's nothing greater than watching them setting up and when they're working here behind City Hall. And I tell you, it literally puts Hamilton on the map, because when you're watching movies and you see a site and go, that's Hamilton. And I know I was at went to a movie recently last year, Mr. Mayor also went, was The Road to the Lemon Grove by Charlie Chiarelli, and it's pretty well filmed in Hamilton. And it was very exciting to take my mother and see and say, well, you remember this area, you remember this area? So we really are fortunate to have that opportunity here in this city with the diverse development and historical buildings, et cetera. So I'm pleased to continue to support this industry and staffing going forward. So with that, on the motions on the floor, moved and second. Mr. Mayor, you want to add one more comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that it's not coming back here, because this committee was not set up to manage the budget of the film office. So what committee are we taking that to, Madam Clerk? Or Mr. Ferguson?
I would like to confirm, but it may be either, it will probably be planning.
Okay, that's good, thank you. So not here. Okay, great, thanks.
Jason, did you want to add to that? Planning, correct?
So through the chair, so typically our tourism and culture stuff would flow through GIC, so we could bring it there if that's the will of committee.
That's even better. Perfect. Okay. Councillor Ferguson?
I think that's fine for future meetings, but I suspect this side of the table will be interested in seeing these numbers for the first one that comes back.
We can bring it back.
Just as an information report, and then it can go to GIC in the future.
Absolutely. Okay, Madam Clerk has that. So it's moved and seconded. All in. Well, it would go ahead.
My understanding is that an information report will come back to Open for Business, but then annually, a report will be going to GIC.
Okay. All in favor? It's a recorded vote. Thank you. Those that vote, please do. Okay, carries. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, and may I also have a motion to receive the presentation, moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Danko. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to move on now. Thank you, ladies. We're going to move on to item 7.2, is the continuous improvements process, review financial incentive program metrics, case study number 28. And I understand we have Tony Sergi, Binu Kora, and Stephen Kislin here, who is coming up to make presentation. Is someone coming up? Or is it just an information for us?
Sorry, through the chair. So 7.2 is the financial incentive program. So Judy Lamb and Carlo Gorni have that one. And then it is the presentation 9.1, which is the Tony
Okay,
Sergi's
my
item.
apologies then. Continuous improvement process review financial incentive program is just a case study. So is there any questions or comments to it? Because there's no presentation on it. No questions or comments. May I have a motion to receive item 7.2?
We have just lost quorum, so we cannot receive the item.
Okay. Yes, you can ask the question, Rachel, and if we could just, Councillor Partridge is probably just getting a coffee, but she knows that we need quorum. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. Sorry for the late notice there. So I just wanted to ask a few questions about the grant process. So I think it's great that it looks like our numbers overall have gone up. Am I right in believing, has our dollar figure also gone up since the previous year? I'm not sure who I asked you.
Hi, Rachel. Could you repeat your question?
Yeah, sorry. So I was just looking at the totals, and I think it's great that we've jumped from 180 to 192 from 2017 to 2018. I was just wondering if our dollar figure overall has also gone up.
In terms of the report doesn't show those numbers, but on average, it would be proportional because there's maximums to the grants.
Awesome. And I noticed when looking through the report that certain grants seem to be increasing and others seem to be decreasing. Do you find there's a reason for this?
The one big increase we noticed was the Community Improvement Property Grant Facade Program. So in previous years, we did notice that the BIA facade program was increasing faster, and then we had put a hold on the other program that's outside the BIAs. It seems to have reversed. The BIA numbers have gone down a bit, and the outside BIAs had increased, but then it just goes back and forth because now for the third quarter in 2019, we've now seen a decreased outside the BIA program. So it just goes back and forth. I think in terms of this program has been around for a while, and it depends on the changes in businesses to turnover that, we did put a limit in our last CIP review that a BIA can only have a grant every 5 years up to the maximum.
And I did just want to highlight, I know this is me being slightly only Barton, so I apologize, but the Barton grants have all gone down, some somewhat significantly for me, 13 to 9 from 2017 to 2018. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback to the committee on that. My belief is, and no offense to the staff, you're great, do not get me wrong, and I love these grants, I'm a big believer in them. But my belief is that there's a long wait time to get approval on these grants, and sometimes they can be very cumbersome for our property owners and our businesses to go through the process. Often, it can take longer than 6 months, and we've found that has halted development on our street and revitalization, which is unfortunately making it a bit of a negative more than a positive. I think the grants are a big attraction piece for our property owners, which is great. But those concerns I do have for sure. I just wondered if there were reasons for the lag in response rates, and if anything's being done to help mitigate that.
So through the chair, maybe I'll start the answer, because that actually is one of the key purposes of putting this information report before you. This committee will know that typically once a year we come and report back to this committee on various timelines and indicators for processing building permits, for processing planning applications, engineering submissions, things like that. We haven't in the past developed internal KPIs for approval of these incentive program applications. So one of the elements of this information report is to advise committee that that's exactly what we intend to do as part of our work plan over the next coming months, is actually develop internal KPIs so that we can communicate to applicants, business owners, that this is the amount of time you should expect it to take to review one of these applications. And then we can include that in our annual performance reporting metrics back to this committee and back to council as to how long it takes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Turn your mic off there. Thank you. So with that, may I motion to have receive? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Partridge. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Move on now to, my apologies for jumping ahead there, 9.1 is the staff presentation of the Growth Management Electronic Engineering Review Process. You have it before you, and I guess Binu is coming down.
Through the chair, if I can give a little brief introduction. Today we have Binu Kaura and Steve Kislin are going to provide a brief update on the use of technology. This is basically a continuation and building off the previous study that was completed by the Neville Report, 2015-2016, on how to leverage technology. A lot of the industry concerns were always around the speed in terms of our approvals and the delivery and the consistency of the approvals. So what we have here as part of that is the use of Bluebeam, and it's been piloted right now in our subdivision group, and this is related to new subdivisions that come after all the draft plans have been approved. And staff are going to walk you through. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do a live demonstration because of the software. But what they've captured is snapshots on how the review process works in terms of both of tracking changes and developing summary sheets as we move forward. Steve is one of our project engineers working on those detailed reviews on the front line, so they have hands-on experience as it relates to this pilot area. And so, having said that, I turn it over to Binu Kaura.
Binu, good morning.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, Madam Chair, Mayor, respected Mayor, councillors, and committee members. As Tony said, my name is Binu Kaura. I'm the Manager of Development Approvals. I also have Steve Kislin here. If you have any technical questions, he can also help me to answer some of those questions. The development engineering is currently trying to implement a technology that supports digital submissions and the engineering review in electronic versions. To support the engineering digital review process, City actually has purchased the Bluebeam. We also, as you know, we also have Amanda process that actually support the Bluebeam program and file management. So at this time, I would like to present the Bluebeam. This. Thanks. I hope it will work now. So currently, staff are learning how to use this program. We are finding this program has and will continue to help substantially to facilitate the electronic review process. If you look at, this slide, you can see Bluebeam's primary functions are measurement and scaling tools, document markups, document overlay and comparison, and also markup list and summary of comments. So I would like to discuss each of these functions in detail. If you look at this slide, you can see the first slide is measurement and scaling tool. Any engineering submissions, we wanted to actually make sure that especially actually if you look at a M plan or a register plan, we want to measure to make sure that the road width, I'm just using an example, if it is a 20-meter right-of-way, actually they are dedicating, the staff actually have to make sure that actually that 20 meter is the exact measurement. So this tool actually is allowing us to measure length, area, poly length, perimeters, radius, and angle. There are several actually good tools we have for the measurement. And the very interesting part is the document markup. If you actually look at this drawing, you can see when an engineering submission actually comes in, we can pull out the information into the Bluebeam, and we can mark up that drawings, and with a bubble or a cloud, you can put your comments directly into the drawings. You can use, you can highlight with the text boxes, lines, arrows, arc, polygons, and you name it. Actually, you can do everything what you like to do with this markup tool. And I also actually wanted to show you about the markup tool. So if you look at actually this drawing, so these drawings actually we can mark up with the different colors. For example, Tony Sergi's actually group actually has 4 sections. If you circulate the drawings to various sections, including public works, what they can do, they can actually mark up the drawing based on different colors. When we receive the drawings, we can see from each department what comments actually they provided on these drawings. So another important component is we can overlay the drawings. So we received multiple submissions. The first submission actually comes in, staff actually review the drawings and provide comments. But when the second submission comes in, we can overlay the drawings on top of each other. So if you look at actually this slide, you could see the green lines and the text. That is basically the first submission. And if you look at actually the black lines, these are actually from the second submission. All this, you can see the text. So you can identify with the second submission what the consultant actually made the changes in the drawings. So another important helpful tool is that we can compare the drawings to see what changes were made from the first submission to second submissions. The orange clouds that indicate the changes were proposed from the first submission. In a split screen view, with a synchronized turned on, the Bluebeam will zoom, plan, and move with both drawings simultaneously so that actually we can see the changes. So especially what I'm trying to say is we have 2 drawings from the first submission and the second submission. You overlay the drawings, then you can see what changes this orange text and the bubbles actually indicate. These are the changes the consultant actually made. This is an extremely important tool for my group because we can see what changes actually they made. So this is a drawing actually we pulled out actually from the subdivision. So when we were reviewing the first submission, we overlay the second submission. So you can see the green and the dark lines, that is from the first submission. So the red lines actually, or the text actually indicated, you can see there are changes. Especially they are changing the block size, the lot numbers, and all the things actually we can see. This is an extremely good tool actually for us to look at this. Imagine actually we are reviewing this manually. It's actually going to create lots of time, effort, and we also may miss actually certain things. So this tool is actually giving us exactly what we need. What I did, I overlay the site plan over top of another drawings. You can see the dark lines and the text. That is the first submission. Second submission, you can see all that red marked and the red test. So especially you can see the cross sections here. These are all added based on city's comments for the second submission. This is an extremely important tool actually for us, and we excited to learn this program so that actually we can fast track our review process. So, and the next slide is actually if I look at the markup summary. If you look at the top part, these are the comments actually we given. So as soon as we type the information in the drawing, the markup list, you can see at the bottom, see right here, there is a summary of the list actually going to be produced. So that basically automatically it creates the markup list. We can transfer all this information into an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document so that we can send the comments to the consultant. So I'm not selling this product, but I just wanted to explain the additional features of this program. We can also have a PDF insertion, extraction, stapling. Then one of the important components is when we receive the engineering drawings, they also have to submit the tender document or a tender document. So we have to look at the quantities. Easily we can actually go through the drawings and take off the quantities and the calculations. We can rename the drawings, we can automatically add the comments, and we can have the layer management for comments and annotations, file reductions, and also we can flatter PDF. So what we are doing at the moment. So in accordance with the comprehensive development guidelines, we are asking the consultant to submit digital copies of all the documents. So especially we are asking them to give us the drawings in a vector PDF. So what happens is, when an engineer actually designs in AutoCAD, they transfer the files to a PDF. But the PDF sometimes, actually, if you get a normal PDF, the drawings actually has some extraction, or even the scale actually may not be correct. So therefore, we are asking them to give us a vector PDF. Secondly, all the design calculations, and we are asking them in Excel spreadsheet. So I believe actually that's our intentions. Thank you for listening. I hope actually it's not complicated. So if any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Binu. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Binu, for that great presentation and great demonstration of new technology. You know, I was doing subdivision design 25, 30 years ago, too long ago, by hand. And you know, before computers actually ended up doing the CAD system. So I'm wildly impressed on how progressed that has become in terms of the layers that can be had on this kind of process. In terms of this process now, is this actually in practice as we speak, as part of the kind of online filing process that we are using through Amanda?
Yes, actually, we just started this program, and we are actually giving training to our staff. So our subdivision group is actually now started using it, and I'm hoping that actually by within 6 months, we can bring our staff to use the Amanda program. I think Tony actually has some suggestions.
Through the chair, we're in a pilot stage right now only within our subdivision group.
Right.
Currently still have to build the platform as to the form of the electronic digital submissions, similar to what building is doing with their platform as it relates to digital submission. We would have to still migrate to that process as a tool for subdivision submissions. We can start going in that direction fairly rapidly. I think that's what Binu is referring to. In 6 months, once the entire group is online, then we have to roll it out to the industry as to the form of the submission so that we can deal with it. As to being actually coming through the portal like building does, that's a little bit off because the portal has to be constructed on that piece of it.
Gotcha.
So for day-to-day applications, we're trying to get there. Even with Mr. Robichaud, we're trying to get to the digital submission as it relates to that piece of it. But we want to make sure the tool and the technology that we're going to use, especially the naming configuration, because as you can tell, if they insert another drawing over here, then the naming configuration could be off. So we have to be we're still going through that process. So if everything stays the same, it's fairly rapidly, easily looked at, but we have to build in those provisions. So it's there, but not today ready to turn on the switch.
Thank you. And so, and this is predominantly then an internal tool that we're going to be using as opposed to a mesh with the external providers that are bringing drawings in. Do we not only need to not only educate our staff, but the consultants, engineers, and others that are creating the drawings in the same process?
No, I think they not necessarily actually need to use Bluebeam. They can actually we only need the PDF version of the drawings. So they can give us actually any versions, any type of drawings, but we are actually asking them to submit digital copies in PDF. And at the moment, Mr. Mayor, I said there are so many consultants are using Bluebeam.
So it's kind of meshing with where the industry is anyway. But notwithstanding that, if they weren't using it, that you could take the existing drawings and layer on the Bluebeam process on top of whatever they provide you.
That's correct.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just following on the mayor's question there, so the consultant is expected to submit a drawing to the city in a vector PDF format. Can that format be generated by any of the main design softwares, so AutoCAD LT, Civil 3D, SketchUp, whatever software happens to be used?
Madam Chair, yes, actually they can use any program to create the vector PDF. That's my understanding, yes.
And Bluebeam is a CAD plugin, correct? So it's there's a purchase price associated with that if consultants wanted to use this. Do you have an idea what that is?
Through Madam Chair, it costs about $300 per license.
For an annual license?
It's only a one-time license.
One time, okay. So it's relatively cost affordable. On the process with how this would work with architects, engineers, consultants, so they would submit a vector PDF file to the city, you do your markups in Bluebeam, are you then sending back a vector PDF, or are you expecting for them to reply with Bluebeam markups on their end?
Through Madam Chair, we are actually not making any design changes. What we are actually doing is we are only actually putting the comments in the drawings. So we actually send a digital copies of the drawings so that actually they can edit in their own drawings. So it won't make any difference actually if we send it in a vector PDF or we send a normal PDF. But whatever we have, actually we send it back to them.
So a consultant receives a reply with all the city's comments on it. Say they don't do that electronically, they print it out and they highlight and mark off as they're going through their changes. Then they send the drawing back in another vector PDF as revision 2, whatever. Then your staff is going to go through and on your side, check off, do the same thing with on the Bluebeam software, correct?
Absolutely correct.
On the design calcs in Excel format, what specifically do you mean by submit your design calcs in Excel?
Through you, Madam Chair, normally, say for example, actually for the sanitary sewer design calculations, if we are moving towards the electronic review, it is ideal to have the Excel spreadsheet so that we can check the calculations, because all the Excel spreadsheet actually has formulas and so on. So instead of actually we going through a hard copies, now we need to calculate ourselves all the design details. If I use a digital copies of the Excel spreadsheet, the formula is right there. I can check the formula and I can make the changes so that I can see what they submitted is accurate.
Then the requirement will be for all consultants to do all of their design calcs in Excel?
That's one of the options that we are proposing.
I think that would be a bit of a problem on the consulting side for sure. And just trying to check somebody else's Excel spreadsheet is like trying to read somebody else's recipe after they've made the soup. But I think that might require some additional consideration. But I mean, obviously going the right way, trying to have everything electronic back and forth and streamline the process, but at the same time, be cognizant that we're not just creating a make-work project, which just drives up the price in the long run. So, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. I was going to go down the same road. It's very technical, what you presented to us today, Vinu. And I saw a couple of members of staff up there dying to tell us something. If you feel free to speak up if there's something else we should know around the consulting costs. And I don't know, Tony, whether one of them want to kick in, but I just watched the body language. Not that I should read that for all it's worth.
Through the chair, the no concerns. What basically the tool is going to provide is that most people, and Councillor Dankley already alluded to it, that they use software. And the software like Civil 3D once you make a change on one plan, it transfers all the way down through the drawings, and this is what it's going to highlight. And so, again, this is the issue of going back and making sure the changes as they reciprocated all the way down the drawings all comply. It's just time and money in terms of that piece of it. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that what comes in, we highlight, as opposed to spending hours searching for every little piece of it. Now we can highlight the changes and then go back and look at what the impacts are based on the overall intent.
So when you respond to a consultant and make a note on a drawing, it's different colors, so it jumps off at them so they can easily find it?
Exactly.
Okay. And what is, do the consultants only have to spend $300 one-time fee to get this software?
Through the chair to the councillor. As it relates to what the developers and consultants wish to use, all we need is a submission in this vector format. Whatever tool they want to use, it's up to them. We're using Bluebeam because at this point in time, we needed a tool that was very cost-effective so that we can actually evaluate their submissions, whether they're using CAD or other design tools in terms of preparing their drawings. They all have to be geo-referenced, and everything is basically a legal plan to ensure that we have everything tied in. As it relates to their cost, I don't think there's going to be any significant impact in terms of their cost. It's really the format that we're providing back to them is going to be more of a concise digital format. And from our side, it saves on storage and drawing review space, because now we need to actually have a server to store all the drawings so for future references as to what changed as we progressed.
Okay, and I'm sure, I think I'll wait for Ed Fothergill to respond, because he's a person that submits these drawings, and be anxious to hear from him what his thoughts are around the impact of the consulting industry. But they're big boys, I know they can care for themselves. Tony, what's it mean in cost? Is it going to be a reduction in your cost or an increase in your cost?
I was waiting for this question through the chair.
That means you're well prepared for it then.
Well, I think we've learned over the years, there's always going to be what is the FTE, what is the financial cost and everything. As it relates to from inside the organization, we have to upgrade some of our servers. We have to upgrade a lot of the hardware that the staff are using, because you need a lot more memory capacity. And, you know, quite frankly, you know the size of engineering drawings that come in. And so effectively, the monitors, we've been upgrading the monitors so that we can start looking at a very easy digital submission. So there's a cost with that. Is it significant? Well, every dollar is significant in how we run our organization. As it relates to ultimately in the future, in terms of how we go, that's part of why we've been doing a lot of our KPIs and tracking and understanding what the implications are in terms of review time. And so at this point in time, I would like to say hopefully that there's going to be a clear reduction in terms of this stuff. The work that's going on still has to be done. Someone still has to physically review the drawing, whether they're doing it on a monitor or on paper. But highlighting where the changes are, that's a significant asset to the city, so that you're not chasing, I think Mr. Robichaud refers to finding Waldo. What changes were made, so we don't have to spend hours searching for those changes. So hopefully there's a nice opportunity to reduce
You won't
the
have an
cost.
impact on the 2020 budget then for the city?
Not at this point in time.
Okay, because you probably save a lot of paper too, not having to print drawings off.
That is one of the issues about digital storage that we're trying to deal with.
It's good for the environment too. Okay, and the last question is time. The reason this committee was formed, because there's so much complaint about how long it takes to turn around planning applications and approval applications. Will this speed it up at all, Tony?
Ultimately, we hope that's going to be the end goal in terms of consistency. Actually, we'd like to reduce the number of submissions. Ultimately, speeding it up is also reducing the number of submissions.
It does.
The review time and also the number of submissions. About 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I did evaluations with all the consultants, major consultants that do engineering submissions related to subdivision. And that is one of the issues that we talked about. What is the reasonable number of submissions before you get your final approval, and what kind of time frame? And that was where we came up with 12 weeks on the first submission, 8 weeks on the second submission, understanding it's not one application that we're looking at, it's concurrently we're looking at. And so we want to try to get it down to 3 clean submissions, with the fourth one being you're cleared to go. Anything below that is a bonus to the organization and to the consultants.
Okay, Madam Chair, I see Ed and Kyle want to speak on this, so I look forward to hearing their comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Matteo first. Matteo?
Thank you. My question, Madam Chair, was is just the same as Councillor Ferguson's, just a little more specific. Were there any projections or numbers on the time saving and the amount of time that it would take for a project submission to be completed through?
So we are at the beginning point in terms of running the Blue Beam internally, and I don't have any hard data as it is right now because we're doing both. And so when we have some significant data in terms of whether it has an impact on the number of submissions or the timelines for the submission, we'll report back as to what our findings are. At this point, I don't have anything, but I suspect it would show a positive decrease.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Tony. Through you, Madam Chair. But before you started the process, was there an idea of, it's going to, save X amount of staff time, therefore it'll take this much less time or something like that?
In all honesty, we didn't even go down that road. It was a matter of managing what we have in terms of working space, drawing review space. I would love to take you for a tour of our office space to see exactly what the staff are looking at in terms of trying to roll out 2 sets of drawings on their desks. It's not very practical at times, right?
So just so I understand. So it's not just about the end, the service side of it, but it's also about efficiency within the office.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fothergill? Don't.
This time. That was my question too, about the impact on timing. Hopefully, it over time, it will reduce the processing time of each submission. I know this is an issue whenever I do a submission. I always ask the consultants to list the changes that have been made, because these plans are very complex. You send in an original plan, you get comments, you send in a new plan back. It takes a long time to figure out which piece has been changed. So I try to make sure that people list those changes, but this will, I think, sort of formalize it more and hopefully make it easier for staff. So hopefully that's something to look at, a way to maybe reduce the process somewhat. Maybe we can follow the film industry, have our approvals in 3 to 5 days. That'd be nice. If we can at least
Really
reduce that time frame. In terms of impact in the industry, I don't do these kinds of drawings myself, but I would suspect that most consultants would have the software needed to make the submission to the city. From the sounds of it, the consultants don't have to buy this software and use it themselves. They just have to make sure the submission material's in the right format. So I wouldn't suspect it would be a huge issue for applicants. I think it's a good initiative, and if it can save time down the road, I think that'd be a great thing.
Through the chair, if I can, I appreciate Ed's concern. I'd like to address some of the comments as it relates to the moving target. And that's why right now what's really a time-consuming, which this software will hopefully alleviate, is related to when we review drawings, we've gone to a standard format in terms of reporting our comments. And the reason we went to a standard format with 3 clear categories is that we want to make sure that we're tracking these changes and the implications. So the very first standard reporting, what was submitted and what wasn't addressed, because sometimes you're waiting for another technical report that wasn't submitted with their first engineering drawings. It may be related to traffic or swim. So we want to highlight what wasn't addressed in terms of the council-approved conditions or technical data. The second category in terms of staff comments were what was addressed that resulted in additional changes, and this is where we're highlighting the additional changes that may have been triggered as a result of the first comments. And the third part is where sometimes we won't review a certain element, such as grading, because we know there's going to be shifts in elevations and drainage requirements, or other items that were, Ed has alluded to, what wasn't captured on the first 2 submissions. So we want to capture that from a learning perspective from staff, what was generally missed or inconsistencies, so that as part of the news group, they have regular meetings on continuous improvement and dealing with these missing elements. So we try to standardize our things to prevent the issues coming back saying, well, it wasn't identified previously. We try to link it back whether it's we missed it or was something that came about as a result of all these changes. So.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Kyle?
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Just to speak to our industry, we've used Bluebeam in our office for well over a decade as our primary PDF and markup tool. But regardless of that, as has been said here, even if we didn't have Bluebeam in our office, we'd be able to receive those comments through any PDF software. So it doesn't require folks in the industry to be upgrading their software or changing their software, because everybody has the capacity to view a PDF. One question, or two questions, sorry, I had is, so this is being introduced as an engineering department review tool. Is there the potential, or is it being looked at to introduce it to other departments, such as building, planning, and the like?
Through you, Madam Chairman, the short answer is yes. We had, the growth management section actually had staff that in their previous occupations or positions had used Bluebeam, and that's why growth management agreed to take the lead on sort of piloting and trying out the Bluebeam project. And once the results are completed of their review, then we'll be looking at rolling it out into other parts of the organization.
Great. No, that's excellent to hear. You know, as Ed said, anything that makes the process not only more efficient, but also results in higher quality and more all-encompassing comments through the initial review is something that we certainly welcome. My next question is just about communication to the industry. How is this being communicated to the industry? One potential pitfall or concern that I see is, for instance, if additional details are asked to be added and it results in the consultant reorganizing their sheet, so they end up moving their drawings around to different sheets, whatnot, would that result in, when you're doing your comparison tool, everything showing up as being changed?
Through you, Madam Chair. At the moment, actually, if you look at the engineering standards, we are actually receiving the digital copies in PDF. So there is no change in the process. The only addition is we are asking them to give us a vector PDF. So there is a naming conventions actually the consultants are using at the moment. There is no change in the naming convention. So I'm not sure actually there is any changes.
Yeah, if I could just clarify the question. So if my site plan's here, and then I have section details here, and I have to add an additional section detail that results in my site plan shifting on the sheet, when you do that digital comparison, because the actual site plan drawing is in a slightly different physical location on the sheet, would it negate the ability to see changes?
I'm going to ask Steve to give you basically the technological answer to that options.
I know that's getting into the weeds of being technical, but it just speaks to anything that might have to be communicated to the industry in maintaining their drawing conventions.
Through the chair. So what you can do is you can actually take a snippet, a window of any portion of that drawing. So you would essentially start with your overlay of the drawing. You see the differences in the plan. Okay, this detail is now on this portion of the page. You would take a window of the previous submission and you would overlay it with that new location. So regardless of where the details, notes, where the plan itself, plan and profile portion is on the plan, you're able to move it to where the new location is and compare.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you very much, and it sounds like a great tool.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, if you look at this drawing, you can see there is a cross-section they added on the side. So we don't have a specific location. Wherever they can put those informations, that should be fine with us.
Great, thank you.
I don't know if it's relevant in this case, so I apologize if it's not, but I've heard in other cases where some people have done submissions and they're waiting for staff members to get back on holiday to review it because it has to be one person to chat about things. Will this mitigate that so that now basically anyone in the department can deal with this case?
Through the chair to the question, as it relates to, ultimately, we'd like to get to that point, but depending on where it is, so if a submission comes in, that's why we're trying to give expectations. First submission, 12 weeks, the second submission, 8 weeks. So if the digital submission comes in halfway through the 8-week process, and the person's gone for 1 week, they're managing their workload. So it's really how you manage the workload and when it's coming in. If the submissions are, we're not managing that time frame, that's when the manager will start looking at, depending on what came in on one person's workload, and they may shift it. But for the most part, staff, from a management tool, we look at when training and vacation is and what their workload is to make sure that we try to accommodate those issues. But typically, from a submission time frame, maybe from your recommendation, maybe there should be a CC that goes to the senior project manager that's looking at that so it doesn't fall through the cracks.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further speakers, with that, may I have motion? Thank you, Benu, and everyone that's involved in this. Certainly good news moving forward. We hope that it does improve our processes. And it's been moved by Mr. Mayor, seconded by Councillor Danko, that we receive the presentation. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Now, as under general information, is there any other information or business that anyone wishes to put forward this morning? Seeing none, then may I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, committee members.